here today for our annual Program Quality Enhancement Grant, also known as the PQE grant meeting, our orientation meeting. This is the Utah State Board of Education in collaboration with the Department of Workforce Services, Office of Child Care. We are excited to have you here today to go over the grant requirements and the grant evaluation for this upcoming school year. My name is Robert Palmer. I work at the Utah State Board of Education. I'm an education specialist who oversees this grant, as well as an intergenerational poverty IGP grant, the Partnerships for Student Success grant, as well as the American Rescue Plan Act after school and summer grant funding. Next slide, please. Today we'll have with us from the Department of Workforce Services, Office of Child Care, Lori Burrell, who will be presenting for their organization, as well as Trina Valdez. From my staff, I have Emily Berry, who's our program evaluator here. She'll go over the evaluation at the conclusion of our meeting today. And we also have Marilee Wendell with us, who is our USBE fiscal staff. And I'll let Lori introduce her additional staff members as we go throughout the presentation this morning. So a little bit of background on this grant. During Utah's 2018 legislative session, the legislature passed Senate Bill 202, which authorized the Department of Workforce Services, Office of Child Care, and the Utah State Board of Education to provide grants to promote highly qualified after-school programs. Additionally, the bill required DWS and USBE to work together to set and track academic and enrichment components and quality standards. Next slide, please. So the grant reporting requirements requested by USBE or DWS program specialists will be mid-year and annual reports. The mid-year report, the data is collected from the beginning of the program through December 10th, 2022. The report will be due December 16th. The annual report, the data is collected from the beginning of the program through May 12th, 2023. The report will be due May 19th. As requested by our Utah After School Network out of school time specialist, the quality tool will be due this year, November 18th, 2022. The program information form will be open from April 1st through May 31st. Requested by our USB internal evaluator, Emily Berry, is our participation data check-in in December, and participation data will be due in May. Emily will go over those a little bit more in detail during her portion of the program today. Next slide, please. So for Utah State Board of Education grantees only, this grant requires a qualifying match in certification. The match can include donated funds, private foundation grants. It cannot include in-kind match or donations, originate from any government funding source, including local, city, county, state, or federal, originate from parent fees, and originate from child care subsidies. Next slide, please. For reimbursements, we ask that you submit at least 4 reimbursements each fiscal year. A good way of doing this is to do it through quarterly through the Utah Grants Management System. Full documentation is requested with the first invoice, and general ledger is required with each invoice after the first invoice. Please report qualified match utilizing the Google form. Next slide, please. For fiscal reimbursements of state funds, USBE will accept a general ledger with a detailed listing of expenses as described below. Detailed general ledger, not journal entries, ledger must document the name of whom is being paid with grant funds. If the grant is federal funds, then please provide time and effort. Additionally, needs to document specific items for purchase. The LEA programs needs to have the receipts on file for auditing and monitoring as requested, as well as the time and effort for the personnel that are being funded in alignment with the project and grant. Next slide, please. I'm now going to turn the time over to my colleague from Department of Workforce Services, Office of Child Care, Lori Burrell, to present on her portion of the grant from DWS OCC. Lori?
Thanks, Robert. As Robert said, I'm with DWS, Office of Child Care. And with me today, I have Joe Edmond, who's our fiscal grant manager, and Kristen Notch, who is with UAN, and they will present to you as well. I will go over the performance requirements with you for this grant. There were some changes made, so please pay close attention to the training requirements this year. Next slide, please. The performance requirements: you must be an existing school-age program. You must offer programming a minimum of 10 hours per week for 32 weeks during the school year. You must serve at least 10 youth on an average daily basis, with 40% of those students enrolled that qualify for free or reduced lunch. You must provide both academic programming and prevention education activities twice per week throughout the program year. You must adhere to the fee waiver and slide feeding scale requirements. You must collect parent permissions to have students participate in any necessary surveys or share student data as requested to fulfill the outcomes of this grant as identified in the RFGA, which is the DWS, and the program assurance, which is through USBE. And then you must fulfill the training requirements. Next slide, please. So this is new this year. We've made some changes from the peer learning communities that we did last year. So this year you'll be required to ensure that all leadership staff, that includes site directors or their equivalent associated with the site participants, the site participant in the majority of the professional development offered by UEN and other partners. UEN and other partners will offer a school year calendar reflecting peer learning community courses. Topics can include relationships and interactions, as well as standard care competencies. Courses will be offered once a month for 8 months. These courses will run between 1 to 2 hours and will be recorded for viewing throughout the school year. Leadership staff at the program will select 4 courses throughout the school year to attend. Upon completion of those courses, you're going to submit course feedback and SMART goals form to identify the implementation strategies, and you're going to review set SMART goals with UEN OST specialists during monitoring site visits and during the DWS Office of Child Care mid-year and end-of-year reports. In the event that your program leadership has any staff turnover, you will ensure new staff completes the minimum of the 4 courses and goal work as previously discussed, and communicate staff changes with UEN OST specialists and the DWS OCC contract owner. Next slide, please. Academic programming, you will, for funded programs, are required to use evidence-based academic curriculum and resources. Academic program utilizes evidence-based curriculum, and that must be offered at least twice a week during the regular school year. And curriculum must be approved by DWS, Office of Child Care, and include pre and post-test components administered in the first 60 and the last 60 days of the school year. Programs must identify and utilize methods of measuring and tracking all students' academic progression. Next slide, please. Prevention education components of this grant, you must include at least 2 prevention education components using the evidence-based curriculum, incorporated at least twice a week during the regular school year from the program selected in your contract. So each of you in your contract from last year has selected a couple of these education prevention components. Please review those this year so you know that what you're expected to do on that. We do make sure that those are the ones that you are looking for or working with. The curriculum must be approved by the DWS Office of Child Care and include pre and post test components administered in the first 60 and the last 60 days of the school year. And then the program must identify the methods of measuring and tracking all students' prevention methods progression. Next slide, please. The expected outcomes of this grant are the overall quality of the grantee's after-school program. Out-of-school time program will increase by at least 0.25 points as measured by the PQE domain of the interaction, and meet a final yearly post-assessment overall score of at least 3.0. And then you must have 75% of programs receiving this funding will demonstrate academic and prevention education improvement in students that participate 30 days or more throughout measures identified by program organization. And all program staff participating in the after-school peer learning community modules and training during the school year will complete post-survey, which include 80% of staff will indicate that the content learned was useful and working within the programs. Next slide, please. And now I will turn the time over to Joe, who will go over all the fiscal items.
Thanks, Lori. I'm Joe Edmond. I'm a fiscal grant manager with Department of Workforce Services. As you see from this slide, this is the allowed and disallowed costs for this grant. Light refreshments or snacks for parent engagements that are required for this grant are allowed for this grant. You would need sufficient documentation to support that, such as an agenda and list of parents attending the activity. Also, meals, snacks for staff are allowed with pre-approval from your program specialist. And again, those expenses would need to have sufficient documentation, including agendas and attendance documentation to be reimbursed. Field trips must be pre-approved by your program specialist to be allowed, and they need to have an educational component to them to be approved. And that educational component would need to be related to the quality of the program. And also program furniture is allowable with pre-approval from your program specialist. Program furniture related to the care of children, I should say. TANF, for those contracts being funded with TANF funds, any use of TANF funds must be consistent with the purposes and allowable TANF rules. One of which is that the costs need to be necessary, reasonable, and allocable to the program. And there are more guidance and rules available at 2 CFR 200, and there are links in your terms and conditions that would link you to the appropriate rules. And there is also a list of possible usages for TANF in your contract. Next slide, please. Grants should submit an invoice for reimbursement no less than 4 times a year or quarterly. And these invoices, the template will be submitted to you by your program specialists. And you will submit 1 invoice per each contract. It's not per site, it's per contract when you submit them. And the invoices will be required. There will be certain documentation that's required from OCC to submit with your invoice. Grants shall not use any funds to pay for summer programming expenses. Expenditures during the summer must be documented, including a description of the funds used, like staffing for fall, training classroom setup, etc. And submissions of final invoices for contract terms that align with the state fiscal year, beginning July 1 and ending June 30th, in particular fiscal year. It would need those invoices for the fiscal year would need to be submitted by July 7th due to our closeout process. So make sure you have all your expenses through June 30th submitted by July 7th. Next slide, please. You have a budget that's been approved with your contract, and changes are not allowed to that budget without pre-approval from your program specialists. You can get pre-approval by emailing your program specialists and For small changes, they can reply and give you written approval. For big changes, they will link you to a budget change form, which you'll fill out and explain the need for the budget change. And once approved, you can make that adjustment and bill for those expenses. Funding, with these approvals, funding from category 3 cannot be moved to admin category 1 or 2, and funding for salaries and benefits in category 3 cannot be moved to other areas of category 3. And you can't make any budget changes in the final month of the contract. And with that, unless there are questions for budget, I would turn this over to Amy for terms and conditions.
Hey, thank you, Joe. My name is Amy Lowe, and I am a contract analyst with the Department of Workforce Services, and I have the opportunity to support the Office of Child Care After School Programs. So I'm going to go over the terms and conditions, really exciting stuff that have come with your contract. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so I'm going to go over a couple of important things to keep in mind on that conflict of interest portion, that terms and conditions portion that came with your contract. It is 11 pages. It is a lot of information, but I am going to touch on some things that I think are good to keep in mind that are going to help you be successful. First thing that I want to talk about is just a reminder of conflict of interest. We just want to remind you that we're asking that none of your owners, directors, officers, etc., cannot be also an employee of the state of Utah or DWS. Okay, so if you're working on the grant, we're asking that you're not also employed by DWS or the state of Utah. It does give a definition of what a relative is. Okay, we'll go over that. But just a reminder, we're asking that also any of the directors, officers, or employees working under the grant are also not a relative of an employee of DWS. Okay, so we're asking that you're not employed by DWS or the state, or also that if you're working under the grant, you let us know if you have a relative that is an employee of DWS. And relative is fairly broad. It gives you a definition here, but it's uncle, niece, nephew, first cousins, sister-in-law, son-in-law, daughter-in-law. We've got the in-laws in there, grandparent, grandchild. So that's quite a large area to cover for relatives. So just a reminder on that part of the conflict of interest. Next slide, please. Okay, related parties is also part of this conflict of interest. We're asking that you as the grantee will not use any grant funds to make any payments, okay, to a related party without written prior consent from us at DWS, or hire anyone that is a relative. That being said, does it mean that you can't do that? No. We know in a lot of instances with privatized childcare, they're family-run businesses, those things happen. What we're asking is that you let us know. We do have a related parties approval request. You can see I've included it. It's an easy form. We can email it over to you. You fill it out and send it back to us to let us know. If you've got somebody that's you're using the grant funds to pay as an employee or to pay for a service and they are related to you and you haven't let us know, please get that completed and sent to us. We can approve it so that when you go to submit the reimbursement, there's not a problem later and we don't say it's an overpayment or a disallowed cost. Okay. I just had a question from our last presentation, and somebody asked me that they were looking at hiring a couple of people using the grant funds, and those two people were related to each other but not related to anyone overseeing the grant. And that was fine. They were just not related to anyone that was, administering the grant funds or over the grant. So just a reminder of that related party approval request. If you think you have a question about it, please let me know and I can talk to you about it. But we want to make sure those are in place so that when it comes to reimbursement time, there's not a problem. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, monitoring. We've talked a lot about monitoring today. Lori Burrell went over some new program requirements, and there was also some talk about dates for turning in those reports and things, and that's all part of that monitoring, and it's outlined in those terms and conditions about obviously monitoring is going to take place, and you need to make sure that you're following those things that are asked of you, those things that are outlined in those program requirements in your contract. It does say here that if you are in default or not compliance with the agreement, you as the grantee may be subject to sanctions, which may include suspension of payments, audits, findings, different things like that. And at some point, if the contract may be terminated. That sounds really punitive. Usually that's not the case. We are here to help you. You have fantastic program specialists to help you meet those program requirements. But just a reminder, monitoring is always that piece, required piece of any kind of contract through the department. Next slide, please. Okay, so we did talk about monitoring, which kind of led into where I talked about agreement termination. Why would we terminate your contract? Well, there's a couple reasons why we could terminate it or you could terminate it. Obviously, there's termination for cause. We kind of talked about there may be a reason, maybe that you didn't meet your outcomes, some different things. And again, we're going to help you try to meet those outcomes. If it does come to that, you will be given a minimum of 10 days written notification that there is an intent to terminate the contract. Before you get a 10-day written notice, there's going to be several steps along the way that we've tried to help remedy whatever needed to be done before the termination. Immediate termination is not very often, but it can happen if there is some sort of immediate risk to maybe those people those that you're servicing with the grant. There is a code of conduct part in your packet that talks about different things that are required for code of conduct. If those are in breach, sometimes that is a reason for an immediate termination, as well as fraud, misrepresentation, misappropriated funds, those types of things. And then no cost termination can be just something, maybe you found another funding stream. You decided that the grant wasn't working out for you, whatever. That's something where you can let us know that you would like to terminate the grant. You just need to let us know 30 days in writing upon 30 days, and then we can get that taken care of for you. So those are some reasons why we would look at grant termination. Next slide, please. The last thing I wanted to talk about was if sometimes the grant has to be terminated due to non-appropriation of funds, reduction of funds, or changes in law. Maybe the legislature decided to use the money somewhere else. Maybe we ran out of funds. I've worked here a long time and have honestly never seen this, but this could happen. That being said, we would obviously let you know, and then any of the reimbursements up to that point, up to the date that we said that the money was longer available, would certainly be reimbursed. We wouldn't leave you high and dry up to that point. So we'd make sure those got reimbursed. So that's kind of an idea of for what reasons or what circumstances we could look at agreement termination. Next slide, please. Okay, grievance procedure. We want to make sure also that you have got an established grievance procedure in place, and that those that are participating in your programs or those that you are providing services to are aware of how to go about filing a grievance if necessary. And then you are welcome and encouraged to have that grievance reviewed by DWS and see if we can help remedy or help with the disposition of that grievance. So just make sure you've got that in place, and those that you are helping or providing services to are aware that there is a grievance process. Next slide, please. Okay, required insurance. I want to make sure that I reiterate when I'm talking about these insurance rates and amounts, these are for non-government entities, okay? So just a reminder, you do need to have uninterrupted insurance coverage for the entirety of the grant. That means when you were first awarded the grant, you had 30 days to provide us with that up-to-date insurance coverage. And then again, you need to maintain that throughout the duration of the grant. If something happens during the duration of the grant and you renew the policy, we need to have that renewed policy sent to us to make sure that we are maintaining that coverage, okay? what does that insurance need to cover? It needs to be a commercial general liability insurance from an insurance company authorized to do business in the state of Utah. Okay. It has to have a no less than $1 million per person per occurrence and a $3 million aggregate per occurrence. Again, those not as a non-government entity, the grantee must add the state of Utah and DWS as an additional insured with notice of cancellation. If you have any questions on that insurance information, we just put together a really great informational thing, and we can go over that. But that's your basic information about insurance. And the bottom line is make sure that you have maintained that throughout that coverage throughout the duration of the grant. Next slide, please. Okay, so let me just recap what I went over because it was super exciting. We went over the conflict of interest information, which covered, make sure you don't have anyone that's working for you that also works for DWS or the state of Utah. Make sure if you do, you are paying a relative, need to pay a relative or going to hire a relative, you let us know and get that approved before any payments are made, because down the road it may come back for a disallowed cost. Also, we talked about termination. We talked about monitoring. Obviously, we went over quite a bit, Lori, and went over quite a bit of information about kind of what's expected. And just a reminder, that will be monitored. And then we went over a lot of the types of termination. It's not fun to talk about termination. It rarely happens, but we talked about the types. And then make sure you have a grievance procedure or process in place, and that those that are participating in your grant are aware of how to access that grievance procedure. And then about the insurance coverage. Okay, fantastic. Do we have any questions about all of the information I quickly spewed out quickly and gave to you? Also, I asked for questions and I forgot something else. Again, all of this information is in those terms and conditions that came with your grant or your agreement packet. And you're welcome to peruse those or look at those for some light reading. Okay. Do we have any questions? I don't see any. Let me check the chat here. We don't. So I am going to go ahead and turn the time over to I'm not sure who.
I believe.
Thank you, Amy. Can you go ahead to the next slide, please, Marilee?
Thank you.
So here's our contact information. If you have your grant through the Department of Workforce Services Office of Child Care, your contract owner program specialist is Trina Valdez. Your contract analyst is Amy Lowe. For USDE, it's me, Robert Palmer. Your fiscal financial manager is Marilee Wendell. And our program evaluator is Emily Berry. Next slide, please. All right, we are so fortunate today. We have Kristen from Utah After School Network. She'll be presenting today. They're our technical assistance provider. So I'll let Kristen go ahead and introduce herself to you. Thank you, Kristen, for being here today.
Thank you so much, Robert. I'm so excited to be here with everyone and to tell you a little bit about the Utah After School Network and who we are and what we do. Slide, please. So Utah After School Network, commonly known as UAN, is a nonprofit organization, and we've been established since 2005. And for the past 17 years, we've worked to create statewide structures that foster policies committed to funding and sustaining quality after-school programs and out-of-school time programming. We are a statewide agency who seeks to ensure Utah's children have high-quality after-school programs that keep them engaged, learning, and safe. UAN assists after-school programs in building quality programs by mentoring program staff, facilitating professional learning, and collaboratively creating a model of best practices for programs statewide. Slide, please. The current UAN team is made up of 13 amazing individuals. Ben Trentleman is our Chief Executive Officer, and Holly Phillips is the Director of Operations. Slide, please. But the faces you're probably more familiar with or will become more familiar with are the UAN specialists. We're the ones who work alongside you to help improve quality. Eleanor Blankenship, Kristen Knoke, that's me, Savannah Odekirk, Brittany Henderson, Alex Frank. These are the 5 that make up the out-of-school time specialist team, and we are specialized in quality improvement. And Lauren Lavorson is working with school day alignment, and she serves the entire state. Next slide, please. We support community-based, school-based, child care centers, and other youth-serving organizations. Slide, please. And we support programs in various ways, such as providing consulting, coaching, presentations, trainings, and resources. And we're here to support your program throughout the entire year. Next slide, please. We use research-based assessments like the quality tool, the youth and school age program quality assessments, and the school day alignment rubric to gather data for quality improvement plans. The quality tool has been developed by a statewide committee comprised of diverse after-school providers and is supported by the Utah After School Network, Utah Education Policy Center, Department of Workforce Services, Office of Child Care, the Utah State Office of Education, and Salt Lake County. It is a living document that reflects ongoing stakeholder feedback and the research in the out-of-school time field. The ongoing input received will continue to inform future improvements and make the quality tool relevant, useful, and user-friendly. The Youth and School Age Program Quality Assessments, commonly known as YPQA and SAPQA, were developed through the Weichert Center, and they use the Positive Youth Development multi-year study to validate best practices. And the School Day Alignment Self-Assessment rubric was created through a collaboration between Utah After School Network, Utah Education Policy Center, United Way of Salt Lake, and the Charles S. Mott Foundation. Slide. Through these tools, we are able to gather data to assist after-school programs at any stage of development. We use the data to identify their strengths and areas of improvement. We then can assess what relevant trainings and strategies are needed for ongoing program improvement. We work with the programs to develop SMART goals to increase program quality. And studies have shown that when best practices are being implemented, youth have more positive outcomes. And so that's why we do that. Slide, please. This is our technical assistant model for the school year. September through November is when we do assessments, like the quality tool, and make implementation plans for quality throughout the year, such as SMART goals. December through March, we support programs with their goals through providing coaching, training, resources, professional learning, and other technical assistance. Then in April and May, we assess again and provide database feedback. Programs will also fill out the program information form to collect the data that was gathered over the year. Slide, please. Just as a reminder, the quality tool is administered at the beginning of the year and is due on November 18th. The program information form is also due at the end of the year, the program information form is due at the end of the year on May 31st. Slide, please. Speaking of important dates to remember, here are UAN's professional learning opportunities. We are so excited. Jumpstart is going to be in person this year. We have missed seeing you all in person for the past while, and we are excited to see you in person in Ogden on November 4th through 5th. You can register on our website, utahafterschool.org. dash calendar. Early bird registration is open now until October 10th. And Recharge conference will be virtual this year on February 24th. Wellbeing Institute starts October 5th, and registration is open now. And e-learning is virtual and year-round. Next slide, please. Regional networks. We have regional networks across the state, and they are made up of a group of after-school professionals who collaborate together to increase partnerships, share resources, receive training, host events, and advocate for after-school. They are led by the after-school professionals and are focused on supporting the needs of their local community. If you would like to be a part of a regional network in your area, you can find contact information for each regional network on the website under What We Do, Regional Networks, or connect with your out-of-school time specialist. Slide, please. Utah supports advocacy efforts through calls to action, policy efforts, talking points and resources, After School Day on the Hill, which will be on Valentine's Day this year. So exciting. After School for All Challenge, Lights On After School, which is celebrated on October 20th, and State of After School Programs in Utah report. Slide, please. The website contains a resource library, houses the quality tool and alignment rubric, toolkits, a calendar of events, program maps, blogs, advocacy materials, and so much more, and can be accessed at utahafterschool.org. This is a treasure trove of wonderful resources. Please don't miss out and come check it out. Slide, please. Our newsletter also contains great resources and updates. It comes out monthly, and you can sign up by scrolling to the bottom of our website homepage, utahafterschool.org. And if you have any more questions or would like to connect with us, you can reach us at info@utahafterschool.org or call us 801-358-2722 or reach out to your out-of-school time specialist. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kristen. So the next part of our presentation is our evaluation. Our program evaluator, Emily Berry, is here today, and Emily's portion is going to be a Nearpod training that will require you to be interactive during this portion of the meeting. So Emily has just put the link in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to you, Emily. Thank you for being here.
Great, thank you, Robert, and I'm happy to be here this morning with everyone. Yeah, so as Robert said in the chat, there's the website join.nearpod.com with the code HU4RS. So if you can plug that in and enter that code, as soon as I see a good number of the participants joined, we'll get started on that. Starting to see some of you joining, which is great. And then while you're joining, I'll share my screen just in case some of you are having a hard time accessing it. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Emily, we can see your screen.
Okay, great. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started then. As Robert said, my name is Emily. I'm the program evaluator on the PQE grant. So today's learning intentions, just so that we know what we're walking away from this portion. Hopefully by the end you'll understand why and what data we're going to be collecting, connecting how the data that is collected is going to be used to meet the reporting requirements identified in the Utah code, and know when and how. Oh, I apologize, that's an old thing. The PQE grant, as PQE grantees, you will submit the data. So here's a quick discussion board. Those of you that are logged in, if you want to just kind of throw something in there at the bottom of the screen, you can type things in, or there's an option to put in a picture or a GIF or something that might explain why it's necessary that we collect and report program data for this grant. And I know that some of you guys got to do this on Tuesday, so hopefully there were some good insights that we had great insights on Tuesday. I'm sure they're going to be great today too. So making sure that we're meeting the goals, yes. To ensure program quality and improvements and student success, absolutely. If there's just a couple more seconds, see if anyone pops in with something else. All right. So as was kind of alluded, we're collecting data because we do have to have a report on this. The Utah Code 53F5-10 requires that USB provide a report on the grant program's effect on the quality of existing programs and the impact of existing programs on academic performance of participating students. And then USBE and DWS requires the professional learning opportunities as a grant requirement. So that's why we're collecting data to meet those needs. In connecting it, the observations that UAN is going to come to your, or yeah, to do throughout the year are going to be used to provide the data on that first portion of the requirement. The participation data we use to connect to the student enrollment and academic data to report achievements, and then the professional learning and family engagement provides that grant requirement on the professional learning, and then just kind of what is happening in the program overall. So all three of these elements are collected in the either the data template or the observations from UAN. Before we get started on this, there's a few things that we need to clarify. And to get started, we're going to do a quick it's called a poll, but a little test of knowledge on what's going to give you as an organization, grantee LEA, the right to share student and program data with USBE. Is it that the Utah Code requires reporting, students participated in the program activities, their parent or guardian permission form was signed, Robert, Lori, Trina, as program managers said, asked you to, or that I have told you to. We got 2 people responding so far. 80% of you have not. There we go. Now they're coming in. Awesome. All right. So most of you guys are indicating C, which is the correct answer. Code definitely is the other option that was selected. And it does set up the need for collecting the data, but ultimately the parent and permission guardian forms are going to be what's going to allow you to share that data. So the parent permission guardian forms, you must obtain these from each of the participants in your program. DWS and USBE both have templates of permission slips that we can share with you, but you're also allowed to create your own. And if you choose to create your own, I've put in a couple of things here that make sure that you're considering adding language that explicitly says that you're sharing the data with USBE so that we can report on the outcomes. And then if you're a community partner, especially, including language that's going to help you work with the schools that your students or participants are coming from, to help bridge that gap and allow them to share some of the information that you're going to need from them, can go a long way in bridging that gap sooner rather than later. And if you need help, or you're trying to work with schools and you can't figure out how to get to where we need to be so we can get that data, always reach out and I'm happy to help. So just as a reminder, all program participants should be included in the data template, but unless the parent or guardian has provided permission to share it, then you won't include their personal information. So you, as programs, after school programs, you're going to identify or clarify that you have received the parent permission in two ways. On the data template, each individual role of the participation data, each participant, you're going to indicate that a parent or guardian permission form was received and whether or not the parent provided the right to share that information. So individually by student participant, you're going to complete that. And then as you're uploading your data templates during the mid-year and end-of-year submissions, you will receive 2 questions on the survey questionnaire that indicates that you did collect the data and that you're only submitting data that shows personal information for students whose parents agreed to share that. And that just kind of covers us on the requirement that we have that the data that's being shared is being knowingly being shared and the parents have authorized that. And we are blank. Why are we blank? There we go. Okay, so the other thing that we need to talk about is personally identifiable information, which is commonly referred to as PII. The Utah code listed there and the USB rule identify personally identifiable student data as data that's used to identify a student. This typically includes their first and last name, birthday, sex, state student ID number, local student ID number, school name, and grade level. So any combination of that information can be used to determine who a student is, and so we need to make sure that we're protecting that. And I can, there we go. Maybe. On my screen I can see it, but on the share screen I cannot. Can everyone see the sending PII? Okay. So sending PII, having talked with the USB data privacy team, they have approved 2 ways to send this information. So we can use Qualtrics or we can use the USB FTP system called MoveIt. We've chosen to use Qualtrics because it is significantly easier to use than MoveIt, where you have to have an account and the password has to be changed fairly often, and it's an email that I have to send and then you respond to, and it's a whole bunch of back and forth for something that we could just use a quick link and you can upload and we're there. So these are the 2 identified ways to share this data. Please don't send the data in any other way, especially by email. We just need to work on protecting our students and making sure that their data is safe.
Emily, that screen
Yep.
was blank. That was a
Oh.
blank screen, but this one we can see now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll keep going through it, and thanks for letting me know, but we'll also send the slides for this part of it out as well. So they'll be accessible, and we're pretty much covering everything on them. So we should be okay. So now we're going to talk about the data templates. This year's data templates are similar to the past year's data templates if you're familiar with them. They include an instruction sheet, 3 data sheets that include participation, professional learning, and family engagement, and then example sheets. And I've color-coded them across the sheets so that you know which section is pertaining to what type of data. And there will be a little bit of an example here. So here is the instruction sheet with a screenshot of what that looks like. And you can see on here that the instructions in red and the section with the instructions is red. Participation data is green. That section identifying what to put in there is green. Family engagement blue, and so on. So make sure that you take a look at that red section. It's going to kind of just give you an outline of what is in here. And then I've put in a suggested naming convention for how to name your file when you're sending it over to me, just so that it's easier for me to identify whose things are what and know exactly where it needs to go. If you have questions about what information is being requested in any of the other sheets that's not on here and isn't answered by this presentation, you can always reach out to me. On the participation data sheet, this is where we're collecting the bulk of our PII information. So remember that, as we talked about just a couple minutes ago, the parent guardian permission form is required, and that you're not sharing information for students whose parents or guardians did not provide permission, but you're only submitting activity intervention data for those students. For the days of activities intervention definition, for every day that they receive an intervention, it counts as one. If you happen to do two ELA activities in one day, it still counts as one. So that's kind of how we expect that one to be filled out. And then just a general reminder that the days attended should not be greater than the days of possible attendance, and the days of activities shouldn't be greater than days attended. So how are we using this data? This is the data that we're connecting into the USBE data warehouse, where we're collecting the student demographic information, their enrollment information, and their assessment data. By doing it this way, we're saving you guys from having to report all of that information to us. And then collecting the activity data, that helps us to group the students, because research has shown that the 30 days of intervention activities is shown to improve student outcomes. So that kind of gives us the branch of here are the students who we should see because they have participated enough to actually make improvements, but we'll report on all of them as well. So if there's one sheet that is really critical to make sure that we're filling out as accurately as we can, it's this sheet, because this is where that bulk of the requirements that the code is asking for is coming from. And then we're just gonna do a quick question. So participant data contains PII, therefore data templates with completed participation data can be sent in which of the following ways? So I'm starting to see results coming in. Give it just a couple more seconds. Okay, so most of you have participated, have selected that either B, USB, Move It, or another FTP site, or D, Qualtrics. Those are both the correct answers. We are just going to use Qualtrics for the bulk of the submissions that we have. All right, the family engagement sheet reports the program activities that you are doing with families and your collaboration with other organizations. On this sheet, the one thing that I want to touch on is that activity time is reported in minutes. That just gives us one kind of metric that we're using so that I can convert that over easy and not have a variety of information coming in. And then again, we just use this to report how you guys are interacting with the families and community members within your organization. And then the professional learning hits back on that grant requirement of the professional learning that is in there, and that the staff working 10 or more hours receive 25 or more professional learning hours throughout the school year. And though this one you'll report in total hours. And then at the end of the data template are the example sheets. There's one for each data template that we're collecting. It has just a fill out of what is expected to be in those fields. And then again, if there's any questions that still remain after looking at the instruction sheet or the example sheets, you can always reach out. So this is a quick matching activity just to kind of reconnect on the 4 main sheets that you're going to see in the data template and what they're going to be used for. I see some of you guys making attempts. All right, it looks like most of you are participating or have completed it, so we'll go ahead and do it. Participation data is linked to the improving academic outcomes, family engagement, provides details on program activities, professional learning ensures that you're meeting that grant requirement, and then the instruction sheet is how to name and fill out the template. Just some requests for me. Please remember to try and complete as much of the data template as possible. Do not move, remove, or edit anything when I'm taking everybody's sheets at the end and combining them together. If somebody's moved something, it throws the entire process off, and I have to go through and individually figure out which one is causing the problems. So just if you're not going to enter anything in a field, just leave it blank. Don't remove it. But we should be trying to fill out as much as we can. And then remember to avoid using formulas to complete the template, especially formulas that are pointing to a different file. Unless you're sending both files, I can't connect those, so I'll have to ask you to do the whole thing over again. And then remember not to email any data that's in the data templates. Our reporting for this year is going to be combined with the reporting for the mid and end of year reporting requirements. So your mid-year check-in data submission is going to be December 16th, and then the end of year will be May 19th. You'll be reporting through May 12th. You should be tracking this data throughout the year, and while I would ideally prefer that you're putting it into your template, as long as you've got it somewhere where you can easily transition it over on the, should something happen and we need to collect data rather quickly, we need it there. And then the link to the survey and details on how to submit it will be sent in just one email with everything that we're going to be reporting on at that time. And just please be prepared to report on time. Again, like we never know what's going to happen. So making sure that your data is ready to go towards these timelines is appreciated. So hopefully at the conclusion of this, you guys now understand why and what we're doing, what data we're collecting, how we're using that data to meet the reporting requirements, and then when and how you're going to submit the data. Here is another quick discussion board just on how we can help you guys, or how I can help you guys ensure that we're able to know what we're supposed to be reporting, when we're supposed to report it. So we're kind of throwing out some ideas I had where that we could send a calendar invite and just make sure that we're holding some time for you guys to take care of that as we're coming closer to reporting timelines. Another meeting just to touch base and clarify anything, office hours, Is there anything specific that you can think of? And if somebody has selected some or put up something that you would support, if you could just kind of heart it like that, then that'll give me a quick count just to kind of get an idea of what's going to work best for this group. And of course, if you would rather just email me some options that would work for you, I'm happy to have that conversation that way. I'll give this one just a couple more seconds. So any questions, there's my name and contact information methods. Email is definitely the easiest way to get in touch with me. I can often reply to you faster, even if it's just to set up a specific time to call. I'm in and out of so many meetings that most of the time phone calls go to voicemail, and finding time to get back can be a struggle, but whichever way you prefer to contact me, I'll do my best to get back to you as quickly as I can. And that is all I have. So unless someone has questions or they want to put it in the chat, or I think I'm good, Robert.
Emily, thank you. I thought that was very fun to see all the interaction. Thank you for participating today, guys. It makes it so much better for us to see your feedback. And please know that we do take your feedback very seriously. Emily and I and Trina and Lori all collaborate together and make sure that we're making an evaluation that is not only beneficial, but also useful. We want it to be really useful for you grantees. This concludes our meeting today. We're thankful that you would be here to join us today. Thank you to all of those who participated in presenting today as well. We will stop the recording and I will send out a link either at the beginning of next week or at the end of this week. And if there's any questions, we'll stay on for the next few seconds. Yes, we will be getting a copy of both, Liz. That is correct. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then we'll stay on for just a few